YouTube. Today on the Naughty Librarian, I am going over my mid-January wrap-up. So remember how like December was really coming for me and I'm like, it's January, it's gotta get better. I feel like there's been a confusion here because January has been also very difficult. It's just every day I wake up and I'm like, what fresh hell awaits me today? Regardless of that though, I still managed to read 4 books. It's less than I usually read, but I haven't had time to read because I've been dealing with so much other stuff going on, so just read 4. But let's get into the books I did read, so that'll probably cheer me up just talking about books. First category is fantasy, and I read 3 of those. First things first, I read The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. I have not learned how to pronounce that yet, so that's on me. But it is the first book of the Witcher World book series. It's kind of a prequel book though, however, because it's told like in short story format. And it was basically exactly the Witcher TV show. So if you have seen the TV show on Netflix, Witcher, every story in this book is covered. And in a much shorter format. So it was one of those things, usually seeing the movie before I read the book isn't a big deal. But in this case, it kind of was, because it's not that it was spoilers, it was just that I had already seen the stories, so this was boring because I'd already seen the stories before. And also, like, let's be real, I think the TV show is funnier. It has like this sarcastic tone to it that I really particularly liked, and the book doesn't have that same sarcasm. So, like, I don't know, I just think the show might have told the stories better, actually. So, basically, if you've watched the TV show, you already know what's in this book. It's literally all the same stories. It's not going to be surprising. And honestly, like, it was kind of boring. Like, I'll be real. Like, maybe if I hadn't seen the show already, I might have not thought this was boring. But the fact of the matter is, I saw the show, and the show is much more exciting than the book is. So now I'm just like, oh, when is this going to end? I already know what's going to happen. So it was one of those things where I was just bored with it, which is unfortunate. And maybe it's just me. Maybe these are really, really good, but I did it the wrong way. I should have read this before I watched the show, and that's my fault. So that's kind of how I felt about it. Like, I was really struggling to get through the book. I was really struggling because I was so bored. It might just be because I've already seen all these stories. Perhaps I'll try another book in the series and it will be fresh material that I haven't seen yet, and I will really like that. But as it stands right now, this was boring to me because I have seen the show and the show is funnier. And also, there's this dope dragon on the cover. There's no dragon in the book, so I was really bummed out about it. But overall, I don't know. It's not bad. It's just, it was boring to me in particular. So I gave it like 3 stars because it's not great. I don't think this is like the great part of the series. It's a prequel of short stories. No one's expecting much from it, so I gave it 3 stars. It's not necessarily a bad book. It was just boring in compared to how the stories were told in the TV show. So, meh. The next fantasy I read was Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. This is the finale of the First Law trilogy. And I mean, I've liked all the books in this series so far, and this one's no exception. I really like it too. And this one is mainly a war story. It's just like, here's this war, oh, it's over, cool. Oh, there's a new one starting. It's just wars all the time. So it is incredibly gory and violent. Fair warning. Like, it's gross. Like, it is a war battle and people are just hacking at each other with axes. It's disgusting. It's like so much gore. Guts everywhere. It was very gory. And overall, I finally kind of understand what the first 2 books were about, because I've had that same criticism before, was that I don't know what it's about. It's very good and I enjoyed reading it, but I have no idea what the plot is. And finally, in this book, you figure out what the plot is, which is like, it had to happen sometime, frankly. So finally, the plot is revealed, what the actual goal of the whole series was, and I was like, all right with it. Like, it wasn't like the greatest like reveal. It was something like, yeah, I could have guessed that, but it was one of those like aha moments, and I was there for it. I realize nothing I'm saying makes a lick of sense, but that's because I don't want to give away spoilers. But just go with me on it here. So it's super gory, it's super bleak and dark. It's a grim, dark fantasy, so that's to be expected. But it's also very good. There's some really, like, funny, poetic moments in here. There are a few moments in here where actually something good happens, and you're just like, what? No one's getting chopped up with an axe right now? What is happening? And you get really excited because there's a couple moments in here that are genuinely like, oh my gosh, that was sweet. This must be the wrong book. It has like a good contrast, and I can't really say much else because it's gonna be all spoilers. But just trust me, it is a fantastic piece of high fantasy literature if you ever want to read it. It's a very long series. Each book is between 600 and 700 or 800 pages. They're long-ass books, so just go with it. But they're very, very good. Multiple perspectives, and there's magic, which is very unsettling. It's creepy magic. It's not like fun magic with a nice, kindly wizard. This is a scary-ass wizard, and you don't want to be on his bad side because his magic is horrifying. So it's like a matter of that. It's kind of taking like tropes you get in fantasy of like kindly wizards and friendly people, and like no one's friendly. No one's really a good guy or a bad guy. Everybody's just a person, and it does a good job of showing that duality of people. Like some person can consider one person to be the evilest man they've ever met, and to another person that is the best man they've ever met. It all depends on perspective, basically. So that's like a really interesting thing they've done character study wise, is that there's no heroes and no villains necessarily. Everyone's just doing the best they can while chopping people up with axes, essentially. It's a chop or be chopped world, but it's very gory, very funny, it's very sarcastic, and really a wonderful piece of literature, so I recommend reading. And I can't say anything else about it because it's going to be all spoilery, but it's very good. I enjoyed it. It's probably, I don't know if it's my favorite. It might be my favorite of the series. I'm not sure on that, but I think it might be my favorite of the series. So I really enjoyed this one a lot. The last fantasy I read was The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. And this is the big finale of the Folk of the Air series, and I put on my big girl pants and read it because I was very scared to read this. It's a big finale of the series that I've loved. Loved for so long that I was worried. I was just like, is this going to satisfy me? Is it going to be everything I want it to be? And I don't really know how I feel about it. Like, I'm kind of in that weird place where I'm like, well, like, I enjoyed it, but, like, was it objectively speaking great? And the answer is probably not. Because I'm a sucker for happy endings. I want a big happy ending. I like them. This one in particular just felt very rushed. Like, there wasn't enough build-up in scenes. It's very short. I think it might actually be the shortest book of the whole series. And there wasn't enough build-up. There wasn't enough tension or anxiety going on here for me to really get into it as much as I wanted to. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed reading it. I had a good time reading this. I really liked it. But have I seen other books in this series do better? Yeah, I have. So I think I gave it like 3.5 stars and rounded up to 4, honestly, because objectively speaking, it's not great. But subjectively speaking, I still really enjoyed reading this. I had such a fun time. I am a sucker for happy endings. So there's a lot of things that you can really get into in the book, but the fact of the matter is, it's not her best work of the series, because you go back into the earlier books, there's Jude and Carden. They are a toxic couple. Like, they're just bad for each other, but so they become so bad they flip back around to good. Like, that's how the relationship works. And you like that. In this book, there wasn't enough of that, and that tension and the sneaking and the, being Slytherin AF. There wasn't enough of it. Because in the earlier books, like, it was really, like, strong, and the build-up and the tension was so evident. And this one, there wasn't enough build-up. It needs more. Like, I think 50 pages, not a lot more, but just 50 more pages of, like, building the tension and letting things set for a minute before you get to some action-packed thing. And if it had that, it would have gotten a much higher rating. But the fact of the matter is, it feels very rushed. It's just like, yeah, this is how it ends. There you go. Like, it could have been better. But it doesn't change the fact that I enjoyed reading it and I had fun reading it. But it's not the best of the series, let's just say that. I mean, overall, yes, it's kind of like the ending I wanted, in a way, so I can't hold that against it. Like, if I had to pick my ideal ending for the series, it's the ending I would have picked, so there's that. I wish the lead up getting to the big finale ending was better, because there's not enough tension and build up. It's just one thing and another thing and another thing, and there's no, like, time to let something settle. It needs more of that. It was just kind of lackluster a bit. You know, it's kind of like eating the generic version of one of your favorite foods. It's like, it still tastes pretty good, but it's not as good as it could have been if it was the real thing. It's kind of like that. Like buying like generic Coke as opposed to real Coke. It tastes pretty good, but it's not Coke. That's basically how I feel about this. That's the best way to describe it. It was pretty good. I had fun with it, but it's not as good as it possibly could have been. Next category is sci-fi, and I read one of those. In 2020, I have decided I should read more sci-fi because I barely ever read it. I'm much more of a magic over technology kind of girl, but this year I'm going to try to change that, and so I read Velocity Weapon by Megan E. O'Keefe. Basically, this is about this woman who wakes up after a battle, and she's on this spaceship that is an enemy spaceship, and she's the only living person on it. And she finds out, oh yeah, that space battle? Ooh, that was 300 years ago. Everybody's dead now. The planets have been destroyed. And she's like, the fuck? So it's about her being like, oh no, that's a bummer. And then the other perspective is of her brother in when the battle happened, that time period. And his struggle to find his sister. He was looking for his sister. And the political struggles and all that kind of stuff. So it has two very different perspectives. And then there's a third perspective I'm not going to even get into because it's so useless to the main plot of the story. But it's just basically a group of criminals stealing something and then like people hunting them down because they stole the wrong thing. So it becomes apparent at the end why it's important, but it doesn't change the fact that throughout the whole rest of the book, it's fucking meaningless. So I don't even want to talk about them. This is a 500-page book. It's very long. This one was such a fucking struggle to get through. Like, I really struggled because, oh gosh, okay. It's one of those books that just wouldn't fucking end. And it was driving me crazy, and it was putting me into such a reading slump because it just wouldn't end. I'd feel like I just read for hours, and like 40 pages would have gone by, and I'm like, how is it not over? How is it not over? Which isn't like the good feeling you have while reading a book. It's just going, why isn't this over yet? That's not how you want to feel while reading something. Basically, it's very slow-paced, and not even very particularly action-driven. It's just different time periods for different characters that it was so abrupt changing back and forth between time periods and characters. And there's three main perspectives. Two of them make sense. The third one is just like, why the fuck are they there? They have nothing to do with any of the main action of the story. So all of that is just a mess. And it was so abrupt and jarring all the time that I'm like, why did we switch out of this perspective? I think that was it. It was just like, something's happening. Oh, wait till later. And it's like, would you stop blue balling me? Just tell me what's happening. Like, it was just like so abrupt changes in character perspective that no tension was able to build, because as soon as you had some tension building, you turn off to another character and you'd be like, well, fuck that then, I guess. And I'm saying a lot of like rough things about the book. And the fact of the matter is I can't like discount my reading experience, which was very poor. Like, it was hard to read. It took me so much longer than it normally would have taken me. It's so slow paced and frankly not very exciting. But after I finished reading the whole thing, I was able to look at it as a whole. And as a whole, it's actually not a bad book. Surprisingly. Bet you weren't expecting that answer. In the end, I did give it 4 stars. I had to take off a whole star because it is a slog to fucking get through. But when you get through it, it's actually pretty decent. It's well written actually. Surprisingly, it's very slow. So if you want like space battles and action packed and running from bad guys, you're not gonna get it here. You're getting more like 2001: A Space Odyssey kind of tone, where it's all very cerebral and like slow paced and maybe not a lot of action's happening, but it's very tense. That's kind of what you're getting here, and I wanted more action than I was getting. And I don't know, it's hard to describe it because regardless of my reading experience, which was very poor, I actually think this was very good. It's well written, even though it is not good to read. It's well written as a story, but to read it is a slog. So I don't know, it could have been improved perhaps, or frankly, it just could have been shorter. There you go. Take 100 pages out of this. Cut out some shit that doesn't need to be there. And I think just tightening it up and not letting things like meander off into places that have no purpose in anything in the story would have made this spectacular. So I think that's the problem here. It's too long-winded. There's things going on that have no bearing in the story that don't need to be there. So it needed editing. If it cut about 100 pages out of this and just tightened it, even if it wasn't very action-packed, it would have been fucking solid, and I would have like plowed through this. I would have really enjoyed it. So I think that's the key here. There's a lot going on that doesn't need to be going on. So yes, it is a slog to get through. It is 500 pages. It needs to be 400 pages, but let's just go with it here. It's overly long, it's overly wordy, but the story itself, actually pretty good. There's spies and like war and like evil governments and space zombies. Not really zombies, that's like a misnomer, but there's like some creepy space people and all kinds of weird stuff going on they don't want to get into because it's going to be completely spoilery. It's like a sci-fi story, maybe if you're a fan of Battlestar Galactica, because that's actually very slow-paced and occasionally has very action-packed moments. You'll really, really like this one. So it's a matter of like being able to put up with liking something or not liking something completely just because it's well written in the end, even though the path to get there is really long and unwieldy. I can't explain it better than that. It's a slog to get through, but if you get through it, it's pretty good. All right, well, that's been January for you. I read 4 books, and a lot of them were just a slog to get through. 3 of them, frankly. No, 2 of them were like, oh my gosh, this is such a slog to get through. It put me in reading slumps. One of them took a very long time to get through because it was very long. And then one of them I read like in a day and a half because it was really short. So, I don't know. I think my favorite probably was Last Argument of Kings because that one gave me everything I wanted. The other ones were kind of hit and miss, frankly. So I haven't had the best reading month so far. None of them are terrible though. So there's that. There's no 1-star books or DNFs, but it's been a rough reading month so far. I'm hoping the second half of the month is better for me because this first half has been rough. Let me know in a comment down below. Have you read any of these books? And if so, did you like them? Did you dislike them? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, has January been a rough reading month for anyone else? Because I don't know if it's just me or not. It's just like books are not hitting it right now. So let me know in a comment down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. And if you want to see more videos, make sure you hit subscribe. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye!